Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the TRUTHEARS Zero Project Red. Before I start, I have to say that I did approach this one with a little bit of skepticism, not because I had any doubts with regards to the Zero Red being a capable IEM in terms of the sound or anything of the sort, but because my experience with the original Zero wasn't exactly the most favorable one. I mean, I had to go from the initial 2 units that I bought. I ended up buying another 2 units, so 4 in total, before I was able to have 1 unit coming from factory that sounded decent. The first 2 units that I got, I had massive channel imbalances, which I was able to correct on both of them. The third unit that I bought, that same channel imbalance continued, and it was so bad that I ended up just scrapping it and leaving it. And then the fourth unit that I bought now, actually more recently, did come with good channel balance. Everything was fine. It sounded good. So I guess I was just a little bit unlucky and plagued by some lemons, as the saying goes. Anyway, that's not important. What is important is now that I have the project red. It apparently took about a year before actually being finalized, and not to cut a long story short, or no, that's not the intention, but I will say right now from the get-go that the red is, in my opinion and for my music library, a better IEM than the original Zero. Okay, anyway, let me just quickly take it through the box. Very much the same experience as the original one. Open it up. The box opens up this way. There's some paperwork and some stuff that comes along with it. There we go. Alright, so some paperwork comes inside here. The IEM's sat over there. Inside as well, we get this pouch, which was already present in the original one. I'm not really a big fan, to be honest with you. The cable, again, not a big fan. For this price, not that it's expensive, but at $50, I have seen IEMs actually bring better cables. And the reality is, and you guys know that I'm not a die-hard cable guy. I do believe in cables, if they have the right characteristics, being able to introduce positive changes to an IEM, and in this particular case that was true. With the stock cable, the sound was okay, whatever, and then when I actually changed over to this cable from Nice HK, the sound did improve. It improved mainly because the measured characteristics of this cable compared to the stock one, the differences are huge. Okay, not small, huge differences. Anyway, that's the pouch, which I don't really fancy. Like I said, the cable is, I guess, fine. Brings a nice selection of tips. I'm actually using the stock tips, believe it or not, simply because they actually did yield good results. It's as simple as that. So there was no need for me to be using my usual KB ear tips, although I did try them with the KB ear tips, and since I didn't see any changes or any positive improvements, I just left it that way. Anyway, that's the box. For the price tag of $50, honestly, the only thing that I really would have liked to have seen a little bit better would be the cable. I'm sure it could be done. I'm absolutely positive it could be done. Slightly better cable. But look, it is what it is. I'm sure that they tried to focus on improving the actual earphone itself and making it a better one than the original. It uses there's some specs here in the back. Sorry. It uses a 10mm and a 7.8mm dynamic driver. What more can I say about that? The information that I was able to obtain is that the drivers are improved over the original drivers used. I can't confirm or deny. That's what that's what is being said, and that's what is going around. So I believe, and the fact that they've been able to maintain the price at the same level and improve the drivers, I guess already that's enough testament to an improvement, or that's enough to justify the improvement that has been had. As for the IM itself, it is basically the same as the original. I mean, there's no difference. This is the original, okay? This is Project Red. The only thing that has actually changed is the faceplate. The original was bluish in the faceplate. This one is now red. And that's it. The drivers inside, visually they look the same. You can just barely get a glimpse of them through the shell. And in terms of fit, it's fine. It's not a small. It's neither a big or small, the actual IEM itself. But as I said, the fit is fine. It's got a bigger than usual vent, as you can see there. All right. Slightly different to the original one, which was just a round hole, as you can see. Okay, and that I guess also is a testament to the change that has been had in terms of the tuning internally. And then it also brings, as part of the accessories, a 10 ohm impedance adapter to increase the bass level a little bit. And when I show you the graphs just now, you will see that difference between between having the impedance adapter connected up and not having the impedance adapter connected up. And that's it. Basically, in terms of its physical aspects, the hardware, I guess it's all covered. What do I have then? Yeah, obviously, of course, this is the original Zero. I have the HBB QKZ CAN, which is also a dual dynamic driver, which came out, dual dynamic earphone, sorry, that came out more or less at the same time of the Zero to kind of combat it, and it was even cheaper. It was priced at about $40. And then I've got two other IEMs that, although not dual dynamic drivers, are, for me, one of them is definitely a reference at its price point, which is a CVJ May. Okay, it's a 1+2, so one dynamic driver and two BAs. And then the other one, yes, is a dual dynamic driver, but also two BAs, which is the TRN TA4. And I've got these ones here because the overall sound that you actually get from them is more similar than what you would think to the Zero. And as I said, the May is a reference at under $60 for me, so it made absolute sense. The TA4 is a little bit more expensive. It's priced at around $80, so it already moves away a little bit from this price point of the Zero. But its performance truly surprised me when I had a listen to it now over the last couple of weeks and tested it. So I thought it would also make sense to have it here. Anyway, let's get into this. What has been done to the Zero Red as opposed to the original? The original was the first to introduce this concept of a let's call it a subwoofer application of one of the dynamic drivers, in this case a 10mm. So it had a very quick tuck of the bass, and it was basically flat by 100 hertz, just over 100 hertz. So it had a quick bump and a tuck, and that's it. Very much like you saw as well on the variations, and as you've seen as well in other IEMs, but usually at a higher price scale. They were able to do this. Clinical was able to do this with the TRUTHEARS at an unseen before price. Then HBB also with the QKZ CAN did the same concept, although they changed slightly that. But let me continue first with the Zero. So it has that quick tuck, and the issue with that quick tuck is that it takes away a lot of that mid bass energy that sometimes is needed. And what you end up having is a very much a V-shaped signature that on the one hand, yes, you don't get any bleed into the mids, which cleans up things and lets male and female voices be nice and cleaned and so on and so forth. But it also takes away some of that added energy that sometimes is nice to have. And also, by tucking it in so quickly, what actually ends up happening is, although some instruments do sound cleaner, they tend to lose a certain amount of life. They lose a little bit of weight, and on top of that, what also ends up happening is that you have some harmonics which cause a certain amount of harshness being more noticeable, because you don't have that mid bass, let's say, weight kind of camouflaging it. Yes, you could argue that renders for a more correct sounding IM. I agree to a certain extent, but what ended up happening in the zero was that flaw of that aggressiveness, that harshness, that over energy that is present then in the mids, upper mids, especially in the upper mids and treble, is noticeable. And so, although it never really bugged me, the truth is that when I got my hands on the can and I compared the two, I preferred the way the can was doing it. Why? First of all, because that although that tuck was also present, they gave it a few more extra hertz. So instead of tucking in at 100 hertz, it was tucking in just a little higher, so 140, 150 hertz, with a few extra dBs of energy, which gave the mid bass a little bit more of a weight. Okay. Maybe in terms of graph you wouldn't notice it as much, but audibly it was quite noticeable. And then because the pinna gain was done in a more mellow manner, instead of peaking at around or close to 2K as in the zero, it peaked at further up in the frequency range at around 3, and that made for a more softer transition from from the mids to the upper mids and then to the treble. It just made it more pleasurable. So that forwardness, that possible aggressiveness or harshness that sometimes is noticed or can be noticed by the lack of that mid bass earlier on, is somewhat subdued, and so the sound that you get, although still as well very much V-shaped, it ended up being just more pleasant, nicer, more agreeable, at least for my music library. And the reality is I ended up liking and preferring the can over the original zero. Okay. Now, what have they done with the zero, the project rate? Well, first of all, as was the case in the zero and on the can, where you have that bump there in that under, let's say, 100 hertz area, and visually when you actually look at it, you see that there's a sub bass roll off, which isn't really that noticeable. That's the truth, because you got everything so condensed to that under 100 hertz area. Over here, no, over here you have proper sub bass extension, so you no longer have that bump, which also has a roll off in the lower frequencies. Everything is more linear, and then you have that tuck. The tuck also, the way that it's been done is kind of more along the lines of the QKZ, and then the way that then you have the pinna gain is a pinna gain which is more along the lines of the QKZ, which means it's more relaxed, smoother, rises and peaks at around 3K, and then maintains itself at a lower energy level overall than compared to the can and to the original zero. So everything stays within a tighter window of operation. What that then means is that the sound is way smoother, but way smoother. You lose, let me rephrase that, you don't have that energy, that excess energy that can sometimes make things sound just a little bit too intense. So it makes for a way smoother listen, not as fatiguing, definitely not as fatiguing as the zero. The can in that aspect is better than the original zero. The red is an IM that you can listen for a longer period of time, and actually quite pleasurable, to be honest. And then the roll off that it's done is also a better roll off in the upper mids and treble area. So it's very much a Harman curve, although it is my understanding that Kryn is not exactly a fan of the original Harman curve, and so what he's done with the red is give his own little take of the Harman curve by giving the bass especially a little bit of an added energy. He's also included a 10 ohm impedance adapter to then boost the bass up for those of us that want a little bit more bass focus. Yes, by having that little bass, extra bass, which is noticeable, again, you lose some of the cleanliness in the mids, upper mids and treble, but it's not anything which I think is dramatic. You lose that, but then you gain as well, for me at least, a more organic kind of sound. While on the original zero you had the top of the bass area at a lower level as compared to the upper mids and upper mids, which as well was a situation with the can, but done in a different manner, which ended up making it a more pleasurable listen. On the red without the impedance adapter, they basically, you get that shift or that balance of tuning being more towards the mids and the upper mids, but it's done in such a closer window of operation, or in a tighter window of operation, that it just sounds, like I said earlier, very smooth, more along the lines of what the can was doing, but more polished, way more improved. And then when you actually add the impedance adapter, you shift things around, you make the bass then be the highest point, and everything just cascades down. So overall, like I was saying, for me at least, it is a definite improvement over the original Zero. I like it way more than the original Zero, be it with the impedance adapter or without the impedance adapter. It's now got a sound which can, without the impedance adapter, be more detailed, more mid-centric, and satisfy those that are looking for a good execution in terms of vocals. But at the same time, by adding then the impedance adapter, you then get a sound which becomes more organic, more old school, more along the lines of something like, for example, the Pinon serial. I'm not saying that this is a Pinon serial, no. But what I'm saying is, with the impedance adapter, that's the vibe of sound that you start getting. That's the kind of sound that you start getting. And I am a big fan of the serial, sorry. And so by default, that's the way I've listened mostly to the red, with the impedance adapter. I just like the way it sounds that way. As compared to the May and the TA4, which I thought made sense to include in this review. If I don't have the impedance adapter on the red, the sound of the TA4 is very, very similar to the red. You lose a little bit of that bass weight that the red, even without the impedance adapter, still does have, because the bass here is, you could call it leaner to a certain extent. But this is even more, it's cleaner, it's more detailed than the red is. So that, without the impedance adapter, you get a very similar sound on to that in the TA4. And ultimately, even though there is a $20-$30 price difference almost, I would listen very carefully. If that's the way you think you're going to be listening just to the red, I will listen very carefully, because I think you will be very impressed by how the TA4 plays back music in that format. In the case of the May, I feel the May is a better IM than the red, period. And why do I say that? Well, first of all, because the way that this, let me just rewind a little bit. This, from the get-go, sounds more like the red in the way that I like listening to the red, which is with that impedance adapter, so with that extra bass. But the bass here just sounds that little bit extra smoother, that little bit extra detailed. There's it's a little bit faster in its execution. Is it down to the introduction of the impedance adapter, which kind of slows the driver down? It could be, because the reality is, when you don't have the impedance adapter, the bass there does sound just that little extra snappier. When you put the impedance adapter, it loses a little bit of that snappiness, but gains in terms of organicness, of musicality. So this is a more musical sounding bass. It's just overall fuller, more detailed, quicker. It's a nicer bass. And then the way that they've implemented the switches for the BAs and the setting that I have here on the May is the 1-1 setting, is been very well done. And in the 1-1 setting, which is both BAs working, the execution of the mids, upper mids, treble is, in my opinion, perfect. It doesn't show that it's a BA, you ultimately do know and notice that it's a BAs that are there, but it doesn't show it in a way which is bad or negative, or executed in a poor manner. No, the May is flawless in that department. It's got loads of detail. Jeff Ryan's Up and Up. That's the one song that I used to kind of compare all of these. You listen to that on the original Zero, for example, and that sax gets to you. It annoys you. You listen to it over on the Can, it becomes a completely different story. Way nicer, more tolerable to listen. Okay, only when you really crank it does it start bugging you. You listen to it on the Red, very nice, very, very, very nice. Honestly, very nice. Be it with the bass, with impedance adapter, or without impedance adapter, very nice. Also, the one thing that is worth mentioning is that the fact that it needs a little bit more power to play at the same level of volume as the original or the Can, okay? But you listen to that song, Jeff Ryan's Up and Up, on the Zero, and it's really nice. You then listen to Up and Up on the TA4. It's nice and detailed without getting fatiguing. It's got that little extra detail that you don't get on there. It's just a notch above in terms of its overall presentation, and maybe just loses a little bit of musicality because it's a little bit more clinical in the way that it does. Testament of the BAs being used there. Here it again reverts back to the execution of the Zero being more musical, but it's got that little extra detail which edges it out over the Zero, over the Red. Sorry. So to sum it up, Zero Red, better IM than the original Zero, without a question. Better IM than the Can. I would actually say that they perhaps took inspiration on the Can and polished it up. That's my opinion, by looking at the way that the graphs are and then listening to it, okay? Because there is a very noticeable difference here in these two, while here the biggest difference that you notice is that there's a more polished, a more careful, a more detailed execution of everything on the Red. The TA4 is a viable option over the Red if you're not going to use the impedance adapter. Okay, so if you're a vocal centric kind of person, if you like vocals, if you like listening to a lot of instrumental stuff, I think the TA4 is a very viable option over the Red by being more detailed than the Red. And then if you are going to listen to it with or without the impedance adapter on the Red, the May just edges out the Red in both circumstances. Like I said, the bass is flawless, the mids are flawless, the BA timbre and tonality is very minimal. There's never any sibilance. So all the negative things that usually you come with a BA are not in any way present in the May in a fashion which is detrimental to its performance. And that little extra that you get from the BAs is enough, okay, to justify it edging out the Zero in terms of its technical capabilities. And they're basically the same price as well. Anyway, as always, have a listen to them if you can. Don't just take my word for it. Don't just think that what I'm saying is gospel. Listen to them and then make your own decisions. That's the best. Okay, anyway guys, I'll show you now the graphs and then we'll wrap it up. All right, you take care now. Bye bye. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section for the TRUTHEARS Zero Red. The first graph that I'm actually showing you is of the original Zero, and this is the latest Zero that I actually got, the last one. Just for you to have an idea of what some of the other ones graphed like. This was one of the first sets that I got, and this is already after I touched up and tried to fix it. Okay, so it has that bump in the bass with that slight sub bass roll off, more prominent actually in the one that I originally had than on the latest one. All right, but I did the comparisons with the latest one, so I'm going to leave the latest one here. And then it slightly dips. If you notice carefully, it slightly dips. You see how it dips there? If I center it at 1 kilohertz, you can actually see it goes down and then starts going up. So this dipping here doesn't help out in then maybe helping to camouflage some excessive energy that is found here, which by graphically you would not think so. When you look at it graphically, you look at it and you think, okay, this is a nice graph, tucked in bass, flat by 200, progressive, very smooth progressive pinna gain, peaks at about 2.5, plateaus. Okay, this should be nice, this should be interesting listen. And it is, but when you start giving it a little bit of volume, that's when things start losing their composure, and the scaling just gets a little bit out of context and becomes ultimately a little bit fatiguing listening to the original Zero. As compared to the CAN, they changed those dynamics. So first of all, if again I take it there at 1 kilohertz, you can see that everything is flat. So there's no dip down and then going up. No, everything is flatter. You still also have that sub bass roll off, okay, but you've also got a little bit more energy there between 100 and 200 odd hertz. That little extra bit there, which you might not think is a lot, it actually helps out in then balancing out things, and the fact that it also peaks at 4K, so it peaks later. I actually mentioned 3K in the review, so my apologies. The fact that it peaks later, the pin again, helps to just give a smoother listen overall. It's a more pleasant listen. It's not as definitely not as fatiguing, and even the treble just sounds a little bit more smoother in its execution. That when you now put in the new Zero, the red, you can see that they've kind of taken some cues in terms of how the mids and upper mids are done. Instead of peaking at 4, it peaks at 3, but also then it maintains very much the same kind of curve, slightly sloping down in a Harman style, with that touch that Krennickel mentioned that he would give on the Harman curve, because he's not a 100% fan of the Harman curve as it is. Okay. The execution of the bass, if you again notice, there's no dipping or anything of the sort. Everything kind of more or less maintains itself flat. All right, as you can see there, and then that's just that very, very modest bump in the bass keeps everything then within a tight 74 to 82, so everything stays within about 8 dB window, which is very nice. It just makes for a very smooth listen, very, very smooth listen, very pleasurable, non-fatiguing. I mean, really nice. And even that extension that you see at past 10K, it's more noticeable on the Zero Red, and technically it actually helps it out more. I mean, in terms of soundstage, it's got a decent enough soundstage in terms of width and height. Maybe in depth it lacks a little bit. Imaging is pretty good. Detailed retrieval as well is pretty good, especially without the impedance adapter. And tonally, it sounds very nice as well. I mean, timbre and tonality is very nice, although a little bit thin, but you only really notice it when you compare it to the Red with the impedance adapter, or when you compare it to something like the CVJ May. Okay, it's still got a nice timbre and tonality, much more correct than, in my opinion, than the original. Zero, and yeah, and that's basically it. Now, when you add the impedance adapter to the equation, everything maintains itself basically the same up top. You just get this nice bump of the bass, and what that then means is that you now have the curve pending or sloping from the bass slightly downwards. You see? Okay, now the mids and upper mids are a lower point than the highest point of the bass. For me, this is how I prefer to listen to it. In terms of timbre and tonality, it just sounds more organic. It sounds just more old school. It reminds me more of the sound, like I mentioned, of something like the Serial, which I very much am a fan of. Okay, so without the impedance adapter Red, with the impedance adapter in blue, the green is the original Zero, which you notice very much this extra energy that is present in it, and with it, it's accompanying extra fatigue. It's just not as well. It's less polished. Period. Okay, it's just less polished. And compared to the can, let me just take away the original. And compared to the can, funny enough, even though you do see a big difference here in the upper mids and treble area between the can and the zero red with the impedance adapter, it's not audible as much as you hear this difference in the original zero. Okay, and then finally, compared to the TA4 and the CVJ May, I'm actually going to put the one without the impedance adapter first, so that I can show you the TA4. It's not so much here that you see or you notice the big differences. Where you notice the big difference is here, that although you would think that the TA4 is going to be more, it's going to be maybe thicker sounding to a certain extent. No, actually, the red, even without the impedance adapter, does sound a little bit more fuller. Okay, but what the TA4 offers in terms of detail up top in the mids, upper mids, and treble, I think justifies listening to it, comparing it, and if this is the way that you want to listen to the red without the impedance adapter, although it's got slightly more weight note on the bass, I still feel that the TA4 is an overall more balanced out sound. Okay, as compared to the May, and let me just change the color here of the May to something which is more noticeable. Okay, this is the May. Compared to the May, it's kind of very much the same situation as you have on the TA4. However, the May, you do notice that there's more weight on that bass. Definitely more weight even than on the TA4 by far. Okay, you compare the two. Let me just put the TA4 here. You compare the two, and the TA4 is, this is the May, this is the TA4. Trust me, the TA4 looks like it's got more bass. It doesn't. Okay. As compared to the May with the zero red with the bass switch, again, you would think by looking at this that the bass is going to be very similar, but no. The May continues having, it's just got that extra speed, that extra detail, which makes it very engaging. The May is a very surprising listen, because you approach it with maybe one mindset, and then when you start listening to it, you realize that, wow, this is actually a very good IEM. All right, and yeah, that's it, guys. I hope I was able to explain well myself with regards to the zero red. I believe it's definitely a better IEM than compared to the original. As compared to the TA4, and I could have compared it to many more, but as compared to the TA4 in the May, without a question, I would choose the May over the zero red. I would. That's without doubt. As for the TA4, I would suggest you listen to both of them if you have the opportunity, and then decide. The truth is, the May and the TA4 are two very surprising IEMs. Two IEMs that honestly I wasn't expecting them to be as good as they actually are, especially because when you look at them graphically, they don't surprise you, they don't kind of grab your attention in terms of graph, let's put it that way. Anyway, guys, as always, like and subscribe. Any questions you might have, please feel free to ask, and I'll do my very best to answer. All right, you take care now. Bye bye.